Okay, so good evening to everyone. I suppose you hear me. I'm over that problem right now. And welcome to the last session of Back to the Basics. I'm happy that you survived this 7 sessions with me. I could not believe it myself that we're on the last session today. Today, we're going to talk about leadership and self giving. But before that, I'd like to tell you a story, as usual. There's this professor who sponsored a gathering for his former students, alumni of the university. They are now established in their careers. And so, what he did as a good professor, he gathered them together and started to serve them coffee, right? Before that, he gave them cups, right? So he has this tray full of cups, and then people started getting the different cups, the ones that they want, the ones that they like, right? And after that, he poured coffee into those cups, and then he told them this. He said, if you noticed, all the nice looking expensive cups were taken up, leaving behind the plain and cheap ones. While it is normal for you to want only the best for yourselves, that is the source of your problems and stress. What all of you really wanted was coffee, not the cup, but you consciously went for the best cups and were eyeing each other's cups. He was talking about the source of their problem and their stress. And then he proceeded, if life is coffee, then the jobs, the money, the position in society are the cups. They're just tools to hold and contain life. But the quality of life doesn't change. Sometimes, by concentrating only on the cup, we fail to enjoy the coffee in it. When we're just concentrating on our prestige, on the money that we can gain, we can get from something, an achievement, for example, then we may fail to enjoy life. That's why we should not let the cups drive us. We have to enjoy the coffee instead. We should not let these material things, these achievements drive us. We have to enjoy life, right? And so I'd like you to think about this story as we go along the 3 points that we're going to cover today. The first one is the principle of first and second things. This is not original for me. This is from C.S. Lewis. You know him very well by being the author of the Chronicles of Narnia. He's a good friend of the author of Lord of the Rings, um, Tolkien, right? He said, he wrote this letter to one of his friends, I think. He said, put first things first, and we get second things thrown in. Put second things first, and we lose both first and second things. We never get, like he gave a specific example, even the sensual pleasure of food at its best when we're being greedy. What does he mean? You know, we try to translate it this way. First things are those things that are of utmost importance, and that's why they have to be prioritized. And the rest are secondary. So if you pursue the first things, then you also achieve the second things. But if you reverse that, you may not even achieve both, or you achieve sloppy results. That reminds me of an anecdote I heard when I was a student. I think I must have been a student, yeah, at that time, of a retreat that was given by John Paul II. He was then Karol Wojtyła. That's why the photo here that was chosen by MG is when he was not yet Pope. He's on the right. He became the great John Paul II, admired not just by Catholics, but by the whole world. And he gave the story of some students in I think in a high school. He said that inside the classroom, there's this guy who was really great, at the top of the class, right? So he would answer any math question very quickly, and everyone admires him. And he said, relative importance. And then in the soccer field, people are playing soccer, and there's a guy there who's really good in the star player. And he said, relative importance. One of the key things that he wanted to emphasize in that retreat for students is that we have to learn how to distinguish things that are of absolute importance and things that are of relative importance. Things that should be given attention first, and there are things that are in the second place. If you confuse both, then you may not achieve either of them, right? And if we apply this to this model that we're trying to present to you, nation building, before we achieve material progress, we have to make sure that we live virtue. That's why we place here virtue before material progress. That's the skyline of Ortigas. And now I can, I got reminded of my, the law firm where I was working there in the 26th floor of Tectite, right? And why? Because you may be building a lot of all these high-rise towers and buildings, but who's going to be there working in those buildings, right? Human beings, right? And so it is not building things per se, but building the lives of people in the first place, right? Because they're the ones who will drive the economy. They're the ones who will drive progress in the country. That's why we call this course Back to the Basics. Let's go to the first things first, right? That reminds me also of one of my favorite clips from Warren Buffett. If you notice, I've been giving examples on corporate governance, and because I'm gearing towards that field in law. And he said that there are three things that they look for when they hire people: integrity, intelligence, and initiative or energy. So there's this video that I'm going to show you. Listen carefully.
Play one game a little bit with me for.
Wait. Oops.
Play one game a little bit with me.
I'll go to 150 so I don't waste your time there.
You also have to, and this is the fun part, you also have to sell short one of your classmates and pay 10% of what they do. So who do you think is going to do the worst in the class? This is way more fun. And think about it again. And again, it isn't the person with the lowest grades or anything of the sort. It's the person who just doesn't shape up in the character department. I mean, we look for three things when we hire people. We look for intelligence, we look for initiative or energy, and we look for integrity. And if they don't have the latter, the first two will kill you. Because if you're going to get somebody without integrity, you want them lazy and dumb. I mean, you don't want them smart and energetic.
So you saw that. He said, if they don't have integrity, you want them lazy and dumb. So he said integrity comes first, right? So why? Because if they don't have integrity, then they use all their energy and all their intelligence to do bad things, right? Have we not had leaders who are very intelligent and very smart, and they ended up corrupt? So they use their talent and energy in order to do more corruption, right? That's why first things first, right? So as leaders, you have to make sure, for example, your integrity is in place, right? That's why that leads me to the second point, right? So what then is the first thing in leadership? In the end, what is leadership really all about? We've been talking about this for the last 7 weeks, right? And so let me summarize it for you in this triangle. I call this the leadership triangle, right? At the bottom, you see this triangle. It has a base, right? At the base of the triangle are two things: that you have to be clear of, right? One is self-knowledge. You have to know yourself very well. That's why if you notice, we were spending a lot of time on this on the first parts of of this series of talks, knowing yourself. Remember the quotation from the Harvard professor about clarity about who you are. Then self-mastery. Some people would call it self-control. Right? Unless you really know yourself very well and have good self-mastery, good self-control, you don't just give in to your instincts, right? Then that's the only time you can really give yourself to others. Otherwise, you will just be thinking about yourself all the time, right? That's why leadership for us is, in the end, a matter of self-giving. It is difficult for you to give yourself to others if you don't know yourself and you don't know how to manage yourself, how to integrate your desires to the overall picture, for example, of what you're doing, right? So these are the three things that a leader is called to live. But in the end, it's all about self-giving, but you cannot have self-giving if you don't know yourself and you don't master yourself, right? Why? Why is that important? Because you lead fellow human beings. You don't lead things, nor animals, or not even angels. I still remember a story when some years ago, I was working with someone. I was in charge of people, and he was in charge of the finances, right? The books, right? And then he told me, he said, my work is a lot easier than yours. I said, why? I thought my work is much easier because I don't have to do all those computations. He said, well, for me, I just have to count the money and then, make the financial statement. And the money doesn't talk, the money doesn't complain. It just does what I'm doing, what I tell it to do. But you take care of people, they complain, they have all sorts of angst, they all have all sorts of things to say, and so hard to manage them, you say. And so I thought, oh, that's right. That's right. But precisely as a leader, you have to understand that very well. You're leading human beings, not things, not animals. I wanted to show you this video, the next one, at the start, but I wasn't able to give it because I had problems then with the computer. I hope you will see it. Because here, Jordan is one of my favorite videos. Some of you have seen this 100 times, but listen to it.
Hi, I'm Jordan, and I believe that true love waits. Your body is something that God has given, so take care of it. Huwag kung kani-kanino pinamimigay, di ba? Condoms may protect you from diseases or from getting pregnant, but it will never, ever protect your heart and your mind. And that's what happens every time every time you have sex and with somebody who is not really like your husband or your wife. It will affect you some way or somehow emotionally, and it's not just physical, it's in your mind, and it's going to stick with you. And what are you going to tell your kids to someday, diba? So think about all these things. Me, I wait because number one, I love God, and I believe that God gave us love, and if we are going to have real love, then we must learn from the one who gave it and who created it. If you try to learn love on your own or in the media, what it tells you, you're going to go home brokenhearted, which is something that we wouldn't like, right? You don't have to give in to the pressures. You don't have to do what everybody's doing. Who cares if they're all doing it? I say go against the flow. And to all the guys out there na feeling guapo or macho dahil ang dami yung chicks, let me tell you something, if you think sleeping around, having sex with all the partners that you could have is such a man thing, I have some bad news from you. That's something dogs do. So don't be a dog. Be a real man. Learn to control it. Have some self-control. Learn how to respect and be a gentleman, For me, it's you got to flee temptation in order to pursue purity. You cannot fight temptation. It's just too strong. If you do not avoid it, it's going to get you. Stop looking at things that you know you shouldn't be looking at because that will affect you, how you treat women, for instance, if you're a guy. Pornography, I believe, is wrong. Sex was never to be a spectator sport. If you ever with the person, like somebody you love, you get confused with lust, and that's when it's really bad. For me, I'd rather have what's real than what's fake. Say jolog some piracy, di ba? So for all you young people out there, keep love real.
So he was talking about um, not being a dog, right? And be a man, he said, and be a human being. Because as a leader, you are guiding human beings, not animals. You know, they say here, the dog is man's best friend. But my professor in medical forensics showed us photos because she's handling dead bodies, and it was one of the gruesome one of the most gruesome classes I had here in the university. And he showed us a man on the floor, and then you don't see his eyes anymore, right? And he said, why is it that his eyes are gone? He said, well, because he lives with his dog. And then he said, one of the first things that the dog eats is your eyes. Well, he doesn't really eat your eyes. So, but the dog is trying to wake up if you die inside your room, and then you live alone with the dog. So the dog tries to wake you up by licking your head, right? But in the process of licking the head, and you don't reply, and then he starts getting hungry and starts eating your. I'm sorry for the. So it's different with human beings, right? So I'm just making that point, right? And why? Because human beings, they have to feel that you care for them, that you actually love them. Otherwise, they only follow you because it is necessary to follow you, right? And if you don't create an environment where you build relationships with them, with the people around you, then they will just be there because it's required, right? And you don't want that because they're just with you because it's required, because they don't have any other choice, because they have to earn a living, or they have to do some volunteer work to put in their curriculum vitae, right? So
Hi, I'm
sorry.
George.
So in the process of leading, you really build relationships, and building relationships with human beings requires an ingredient, a very special ingredient of love. Or more accurately, it is love that informs these relationships. This American poet, Carver, he said, and did you get what you wanted from this life? Even so, I did. And what did you want? To call myself beloved, to feel myself beloved on the earth. That at the end of our lives, in the end, that's what we want to know and to feel, that we're loved. Not just at home, not just among our friends, but also in the places where we work, where we do volunteer work or what, because that occupies like 1/3 of our time each day. Right? That's why this is
Warren,
another
people want to know what
another video. Warren Buffett, he is one of the richest men in the US, but when you listen to him, you can see that it comes from something within. Look at this.
But basically, well, the biggest lesson, in a sense, I got is the power of unconditional love. I mean, I think there is no power on earth like unconditional love. And I think that if you offer that to your child, I mean, you're 90% of the way home. And maybe days when you don't feel like it, it's not uncritical love. That's a different animal. But to know you always can come back. I mean, that is huge in life. That takes you a long, long way. And I would say that every parent out there that can extend that to their child at a very young age, it's going to make for a better human being.
And that's why I'd like to, at this point, discuss with you the 3 types of friendship that Aristotle spoke about. He spoke about the friendships based on utility, on pleasure, and on goodness. What is the difference among the 3? It is on the source of the relationship. The first 2, utility and pleasure, they're based on the benefits that are derived from the relationship. The benefits of utility, that person is useful to me, right? The benefit of pleasure, that person gives me pleasure, right? It's about me, what I get from it, right? But the friendship based on goodness is a friendship where those persons involved, they really love each other for their own sake. In fact, sake is an old English word which means love, for their own love, right? It doesn't mean that perfect friendships are not useful or not pleasurable. They are, but their relationships last even in the absence of utility and pleasure. Because friendships based on utility and pleasure, they only last as insofar as the usefulness of the person or the pleasure that the person provides last, right? And that's why I would always joke and half meant. There's a joke that's half meant, especially if I give talks to some ladies. Well, that's very rare. When I go to a school, for example, there's some ladies and some boys. Sometimes they separate them, right? Will you go to Mr. Personality or Mr. Personality? The one who gives you peso, or the one who has character or character, no? So and so of course you know the choice, right? So now the problem is people are afraid to form relationships at work because they think that when you become lax uh, at at work, or they think that building relationships make people less competent in their work because of the familiarity that goes with it. For me, the solution is to help people mature, not to cut down on the good of relationships. You know? So, because precisely that's what we're trying to do in Universitas. And I'm very happy with what has been happening. In fact, people are doing their work very well, their volunteer work. At the same time, friendships are developed among the volunteers. That's why one of my favorite saints said, "There's no better leadership than wanting to give yourself freely to be useful to others." So now I go to the third point because we're running out of time. I always tell the officers to keep the time within the talk within a time frame. So we give you a 30-minute talk for the talks that we're giving here, and then you can go anytime after that. But if you want to stay for the question and answer portion, sure, which sometimes is the is the more important part. Right? So if you remember now, the talk I gave you on conscience, and I used Plato, and he made use of anamnesis, right? In fact, if you notice, I'm just trying to remind you of things that you already know. Aristotle's anamnesis, right? And one of these things is that we cannot really keep good to ourselves. Good things, by their very essence, they necessarily communicate themselves to others. Goodness is diffusive, right? In fact, I would say that if you don't get that, it's good to reflect a little bit more. You open your eyes and your mind that all the things, the good things that you receive, right? They like come in, they build within you, right? And they overflow. And the overflowing of them necessarily communicates itself to others. That's goodness. It is a spiritual treasure. Unlike a material thing, you gain more of a spiritual treasure the more you share it with others. I like using this example. If you have pizza and you want to share it with others, you only have half of it if you want to share it with another person, or 1/4 of it if you're four, right? But the process of sharing brings about the virtue of generosity. You may have less pizza, but you have more generosity inside you. You have more goodness, you have magnanimity, right? So that's why I would say that we cannot just be nice guys, right? We have to be good guys. We cannot be I'm a nice guy. So we have to learn how to do good and to share that with other people. The problem is that they say that the problem of this world are good people. I would say perhaps nice people, right? In fact, there's a saying that goes like this: for evil to triumph, it is enough for good people not to do anything, right? And I hope you are not those people. So what are the three key takeaways for this talk? The first one is put first things first, second things second. This is the principle of first and second things, so that you achieve both. Otherwise, you may even miss both. Absolute things have to be treated absolutely, and relative things relatively. I hope that's clear. The second one is that leadership is all about self-giving. In the end, good leaders are not only competent, part of their character, informed by their conscience, is love and compassion to the people under their care. So don't just treat people like things or animals, treat them as human beings, and human beings need love. And the third one is this love and goodness eventually overflows and communicates itself to others. In the realm of goodness, the more you share, the more you gain. That's why our challenge to you is to pass it on. Thank you for listening.